Oh man. Welcome to the Do Nothing Project. Everybody hear me okay? Sometimes I have problems with this mic. I don't know. Loud and clear. Awesome. Good to see you, Christina, Siobhan, Van, James, Tina, Sharon, Reese, Allison, all my friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Do Nothing Project. If you're returning, welcome back. If this is your first time, this is it. These are the people, among the people. Hey, Lauren, thank you for holding it down with the blue font. Lauren and Andrew are over in the comments area. They help moderate. My name is Jeff Warren. This is your community, leaving comments here. Great swaths of community. Prefer to sit without interfering with the interface, which I personally feel. I feel you on that front. And then, of course, lots of folks watch it later. I keep thinking I want to make it a bit earlier so our European friends can watch it live, but it's just a challenging of timing and parenting. And anyway, I'm glad everyone's here. Thanks for joining. It's been rough around here lately. My little guy is just, the past few weeks, he's just gone ballistic every night, basically. Trying to get him to go to sleep is like an hour and a half ordeal. So I come here straight from Greco-Roman wrestling, my little muscly kind of like ferret chimp who's got crazy torque powers, to say nothing of his lungs when he screams. So I'm a bit frazzled, but that's okay. That's why I'm here, to meditate. Van, been there, brutal. Yeah, I didn't know. You hear about it, but then you're in it, and it's like its own particular level of torment and joy. Parenthood. But anyway, so the Do Nothing Project. What do we do here? We don't do very much. Mostly we just sit, we be human. We be human together. I try to be honest about whatever insane shit is going down in my life and practice anyway. What does it mean to actually try to implement a meditation, the principles of meditation, the actual practice in meditation inside a life that's basically exploding, which is kind of everyone's life now, between the COVID insanity the past few years and the news headlines and everything that's happening in the Ukraine. I mean, it's just a very hard time right now. Someone sent me a really funny text message. It was sort of like, what was it? Actually, it's really funny. I gotta read it out. It was this, my buddy Scott sent me this. This is the new greeting. Instead of hope you're well as the greeting, the new email reading. Dear X, I trust the slow-moving and complex collapse of interwoven systems based on delusion, hatred, and greed is finding you constantly anxious and yet somehow hopeful. Just circling back to discuss da-da-da-da-da. So yeah, shit's going off. That's why we need the meditation practice. We do. We need it for our sanity so we can respond to these challenges. Because if you're only ever internalizing the insanity, that's all you're giving out. And actually, I did want to say something about mental health, because I'm always inside these conversations around people in particular with with actual mental health, conditions that have been diagnosed in some way, especially a lot around ADD and ADHD and bipolar and some of the things that I'm familiar with, but also anxiety and depression. And there's just a lot of this right now. I mean, a lot of these, when there's intense external circumstances, the inner world responds in an intense way, and it amplifies these tendencies within the mind to get more and more dysregulated and unbalanced. So I feel like this idea of a normal, maybe someone is normal, but it's much more about neuroatypical. It's about just the diversity of different kinds of minds, and more than ever now. And so how do you think about that? Because basically, in order to function well in a culture, there's sort of a narrow bandwidth that you're kind of expected to operate within. I mean, this is especially for, something as, if you speak to folks with ADD diagnoses, and like I have in my own experience, it's something that comes up a lot because there are demands from the culture to function in X, Y, Z, and demands that you internalize, but you have a hardwiring that seems often at times to be at odds with that kind of with that way of operating. And so you're expending huge amounts of energy to try to get this far that other people can actually do with much less expenditure. That's what it seems like. So then how do you work with this? And really this is a question for how all of us work with our mental health challenges. And I think I created a grid once on my website called the Dynamic Care Grid. And I think that kind of begins to get to it. And this is going somewhere. It's connected to a practice. I'm going to guide a very simple practice. But basically, the grid is change self, accept self, change world, accept world. It's sort of like you kind of got to do all these things in life simultaneously, and you're moving around. They're all different things. And so when you have a mental health challenge like this or a diagnosis, there is some sense in which there may be a role to play in beginning to try to change, see what you can that you can change. Like maybe you need to go on meds for a while. Maybe you need to do meditation, try to improve your concentration. That could change things. And so there are internal things to a certain degree we can change. There are also, so part of the wisdom of understanding how to work with these challenges is actually realizing what you can change in your external world. Like, how can you change conditions so that the way you're wired is less of a problem? Or how can you change conditions so it's more supportive for you for work or family life or whatever it is? And then there's this piece around accepting that this is the kind of profile that you have. And although some change can happen and certainly some external support can happen, and a lot of the suffering comes from our ideas about how we're not living up to the ways we think we need to be or whatever it is. And if you can actually learn to accept the condition, you can affect big change in terms of the actual suffering. And so how to manage all those quadrants and what that looks like is sort of like, you could write books on this. It's something I've been trying to think about, write about for years. But I wanted to focus on this accept piece with this very core insight, something that I was really feeling into today, and which is that in the case, say, of ADHD, actually, there is no problem with ADHD in the moment. There's no problem. It's like you just are ADHD. You have, in that moment, you might be kind of spacey. So it's sort of like you're spaced, or you might have a kind of pleasant swing in your attention. Or, and on with different challenges. When you look at them in the moment, the actual experience of them in the moment, and this, I'll even say this is sort of partly true with, like, say, feeling depressed, and I'll talk a bit about that in a second. But the actual experience of the moment, most of the suffering lives in the past and the future. It's all around your ideas of what you think need to happen for you, for the world, how you need to change, how you're not living up to stuff. It just creates all this crazy, intense suffering. But if you shrink down this shrink wrap out of that into just what's happening in the moment, you can imagine you're sitting in a moment where there is no demand. You're allowed to be exactly as you are. You don't have to be any one way. Well, actually, there's no problem. There's no problem with being that way. There's no, even with say with something like depression, like when I'm feeling really depressed, it's so much of it is because of the way I think I'm disappointing people, or the catastrophization about the future. But when I shrink that down to the present moment, what is there? There's usually just low energy and some body ache, like physical pain in the body. But if you shrink in just to the actual moment of it, what is it? It's just a breath. It's just a kind of ache, and actually when you feel into the ache, where's even the ache? It's just bits of pressure and movement and dust, or there's just a tiredness, a low energiness. And so this is the deep insight of meditation, basically, that whatever your circumstance, whatever's going on, if you can zoom into the moment, you can find basically a level at which it's bearable. When it's just what's happening, more than bearable, it's pleasurable. It's just what's happening. And it has to do with being able to shrink wrap out of those circumstances and realize that our situation right now is just what it is. So I'd like to try to give people an experiential taste of this. I mean, if you're regular on the Do Nothing Project, you've had it anyway. But to sort of speak a little bit about what that means and what that actually looks like. And I don't know how I would get through this freaking life as a parent, as a human, as a person with ADHD or bipolar or whatever, without this understanding, without this move of being able to actually do this and patiently go into this sort of an orientation through a practice. So that's what we're going to do today. That's the goodness of doing nothing, and we'll see what that involves, and then we can have a little sharing afterwards. Thanks for joining me, friends, on this Sunday night. We're getting real here, ish. 25-minute set. 8:14. We're going to go to 8:39. All right, so as always with the Do Nothing Project, getting here is 3/4 of the thing. So you can do whatever you like. Now that you're here, you can, if you have your own practice, you can do that. You can just lay back, relax. You can implement any kind of formal practice, and you can follow along with my loose guidance here, which is just, meant to be kind of invitations. Mostly what I do in a practice actually is I just narrate what I'm doing internally, and that way we all come along together. So I like to start with a few deliberate, slower breaths. Slower because I usually need to go from fast to slow. Sometimes I need to go from tired and slow to faster, in which case I would emphasize the in-breath more, but that almost never happens to me. So think of the out-breath as the break, kind of this. It sort of starts to down-regulate the nervous system. Generally, you don't really want to manipulate your breath when you're sitting, but at the beginning here, it's fine for a few breaths. As you're breathing out, really landing on your cushion or in your seat. If you're laying down, really feeling the ground under you, contacting the ground. The ground is the great support. Just beginning to get conscious of the ground under you is weirdly grounding. It's subtle, but it begins a process of feeling more settled. And I like to sort of make this, I guess, a kind of commitment at the beginning of a practice, which is I'm not going to get uptight about anything that happens. There was just a wailing kid 5 minutes ago. It seems to be quiet now, 10 minutes ago. But if it starts up again, it's okay. It's just, someone's got it. It's just sound passing through, and it's the same with the dogs and the same with anything that's here. It's all allowed to be here. We need to manage those externals or the internals, the feelings and thoughts that are here. They'll slow down of their own accord or not. But you can't stop them by quashing them. The irony here is the more you just let yourself be exactly where you are, the more things will just play themselves out. So a few more slow breaths. That equanimity, by the way, is, I find it as you can find it palpably in your experience in the form of a kind of softening through the front of the body, like a lack of bracing or rigidity. So we're going to shrink wrap here And the first shrink wrap is to choose a home base. There's all kinds of things you could be paying attention to, including your thoughts, but you choose to pay attention to something simple. Make your experience a little more simple, so maybe the sensation of the breath. Maybe the warmth of the hands, or maybe a sound. This deliberate simplification of the environment. So try this for a bit. Good. So nice and patient as you get settled here. If you notice your thoughts are wandering around, you kind of shrink wrap them in, bring them back from the past or the future or wherever they've wandered off to in fantasy, and bring everything right back to this close curiosity about some simple sensation. Some people don't even want to use a sensation, just the simple feeling of just being. Right? You can do that too. You coming back to right here, this thing that's right here in the present moment. And it's like, I kind of make it a game sometimes. How close can you get to right now? The cutting edge of now, like noticing the softest bit of the breath just as it's emerging. Each little bit. more granular, the more close we get to the now, the less everything else gets shaved off. Find there's just what's happening. It's just the sensation. Good. So as we shrink wrap down, we're also practicing this stance of really radical acceptance, both in terms of the sounds around us, but also in terms of our own experience, the style of our attention, the emotional flavor of the moment. What happens if we just let them be exactly as they are? So if we're feeling distracted, just enjoying that distractibility, the sort of swinginess of it. If you're feeling agitated, letting that just be a kind of bubbly massage. If you're feeling sad, letting the tender feeling in the bones just radiate out like it's speaking to you. Letting them be here, letting the, however you are, be fine, be allowed. And then you return to your home base, shrink wrapping down to something simple, not feeding the mind that wants to run forward or run back or run away. Coming back to right here. It's like we're living in the narrowest strip of land. It turns out to be huge. Just getting really still. It's like when we shrink wrap down, somehow all this space can appear. And we'll just finish with a simple loving kindness practice. Starting with whoever comes into your mind's eye right now. A person or a group of people, someone you want to send good wishes to. And you give a phrase like, may you be well, may you be strong, may you be at ease, may you be safe. I'm just connecting to that crisp intention to want the best for someone, not trying to keep the signal clean, not jumping in with the mind, worrying about how it'll happen or all the extracurriculars, just this simple intention. May you be well, may you be safe, strong, happy. Maybe even picturing them happy, picturing them smiling, settled, whatever it is. And then you can move on to another person, a group of people, or stay the same one. That could be an animal too, a child. May you be well. And we're staying steady in our well wishes. So there's a kind of solidity in this part of the practice, a kind of presence, not turning away, but just steady. And then some carrying over top. May you be well. May you be safe and strong and at ease. May all of us be this way. I'm just finishing with yourself. be safe, strong, at ease, steady, present, accepting. Thank you for your practice. I'm going to meditate with you. Oh, I meant to say at the beginning, I was a bit distracted. Thank you, Andrew, for doing last week when my life was falling apart. Andrew stepped up. It was a great practice. You're welcome, Courtney, Marina, Elise, Julian, Christina. Oh, Christina. Janice, Gord, Norma, Fred. Appreciate the props to the philodendrons band. Shrinkwrapped. Good. I used to guide a practice that was around, instead of being always the equanimity, be porous practice, I used to deliberately do one sometimes that was literally about shrink wrapping. It was more about creating a boundary and being strong if you felt like you needed that. And just imagining your skin shrink wrapping in and the sense of containment, which is something you can play with in a practice. And sometimes it's exactly the medicine we need. Oh, thanks for all the kind words, friends. Schmitty had an emotional and chaotic week, needed this. Yes, I feel you, bro. Nicole, if we can only shrink wrap my belly, tell me about it. Love it all. Nice, Gord. Thanks, Ruth. Glad you felt better, Jason. Thanks, John. Warren Hooley's the guide at tomorrow's CEC. Andrew's saying, yeah, actually, Warren's our guest in the latest Consciousness Explorers podcast. Really interesting practice we did around land acknowledgement and ancestor acknowledgement, and he's teaching at the CEC tomorrow night, so I highly recommend that. And I saw a question there. What if people around you are freaking out? People around us are freaking out. That's not a what if. It's hard, but that's why the practice is so helpful. Just to practice being centered yourself, and that can help calm people around you, but sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes you're going to get dysregulated by all the freak out around you and you lose your center. But at least you've oriented that way. I mean, that's what's so valuable for me about a meditation, to know that I wouldn't even have known about the concept. I would have just been thrown this way and back by whatever winds of fate were happening. But to know that there's a way to actually be more centered and present, and to practice that, and knowing that you're not going to always nail it, and sometimes you're going to get dysregulated. And that's the medicine, and it's the medicine for the people around you too. And yeah, My advice is not to recommend that people try to get people to practice, but just to embody it, and then people can make their own decisions around that. And then accepting that there's going to be a certain amount of dysregulation out there, a lot of it. And we're just in a time where there's a lot of that right now. It will change. It'll always be like this. It's always God and the devil neck and neck. Anyway, everyone else is welcome to comment and offer suggestions. That's what's so great about this place. Shrinkwrap will be a daily trip. I have to definitely do that one. Christina, how do you remember to take your mindfulness practice into your life in general? Yeah, it's all I do. You forget, you remember. You forget, you remember. This is how it goes. Just like in a guided meditation. Forget, you remember. You forget, you're reactive, you're caught up, and then you remember and try to implement your practice. You implement the equanimity a lot. A lot of the time is the equanimity. It's, okay, do I need to be fighting this battle right now? Can I feel my feet? Can I connect to my breath? Can I just make things a little simpler for a bit? Knowing when I need to get away. Can I have compassion for this person in this moment, for myself in this moment? Like, it's those reminders. The more you meditate, the more those reminders are easier to come back to and to implement, and that makes a difference. But it is a practice, And what I like about meditation as a practice is it's so much about also being interested in how to apply it in life. There's always it's a battle. Reminders. Gord says I keep a post-it on my desk that says be present. Like the last retreat I did, that we asked everybody to write down what are their little reminders that help them remember to practice or whatever it is, and it was amazing, the diversity. There was hundreds of messages of just like some little phrase that helps you. Okay, I have a different one going all the time. Some great comments here. I appreciate everybody sharing their good wisdom there. Alexita, do you think we who meditate lose our temper? Sometimes it is hard to be focused and control ourselves. Yes, it's very hard. I lose my temper all the time. Everyone's got different challenges. Mine is my temper. It's one of my things. I turn into a reactive dick. I'm just angry and grumbly, and I notice it, and I can have mindfulness around it, and guess what? I have to go, you know what? You're being an angry jerk, and that's all right. That's just part of how you are. I got that thread in me. It's only going to make it worse judging myself for being angry or losing my temper. So do you know what I mean? You still have to do the best to be compassionate to the world and to keep your center, but sometimes you're going to lose your center and you got to forgive yourself, whatever that looks like for you. Mindful transition is great advice, Andrew. All right, friends, I'm gonna go check up on my lady. I can hear her walking around out there. Make sure everything's good. Appreciate this community. It's really just huge to just be able to be real with actual real people, not have to be anything other than what you are. And have a good night. Come to CEC tomorrow night. It'll be good. Thanks, everyone.